On this tank over here, I don't see a wiring that's going on top of this tank. I just see these two tubes over here. I don't see wires going up here. So I believe the pump that pulls fuel out of this tank is that pump up there. I believe it's that one over there, the one we just looked at, this one. Because I don't see wires going on top of this tank. Oh, actually, maybe this one. Oh, I was wrong. I spoke too soon. We have a wiring here. We have a wiring right here. Let me open these wires. Okay, so these two wires go on top of the tank. So I believe we have our fuel pump wiring here and the fuel level sensor wiring of this tank. Okay, so we got access to the wires that go on top of the tank, which means this is the wiring of the pump up there. I just need to figure out which ones are the fuel pump wires and which ones are the fuel tank, the fuel level sensor wiring. So let me grab my test light and my piercing tool. We're gonna check this wiring. I'm gonna look at the wiring diagram once again off camera so I can figure out, hopefully the wires in the wiring diagram are colored so that I can know which wires to check. And then we're also gonna check this pump over here. Okay, maybe this pump is not working. So this pump is easy to check. We might have to start with this pump first. So let me think about how we're gonna do this. I might have to have Matt in the truck while we're checking these wires because the engine has to be cranked while I'm checking power and ground at this fuel pump. I'm gonna grab the testing equipment that we need and then I will bring you guys back up. Right now what I'm about to do, guys, is I wanna double check the wiring, the wire colors on the wiring diagram with the colors that we have on the truck. We have two wires on this pump. We have a black wire and a pink wire. This looks like black and pink. Okay, and we have the same colors on this side of the connector. So right here we have pink and black on this side of the connector. So the other wire is black. Okay, so if we look at the wiring diagram, we have this over here. So this is our, you see how it says inline fuel pump, 5.0 liter. So this over here is our inline pump, and the inline pump is this pump over here. Now, if we look at the wire colors, it says black and then pink and black, okay? So that's what we have over here, right? We have black and pink and black. So the wiring here is good. Now, these over here, these two front tanks, I hope you can see this, front tank unit. So this is the front tank, this is the rear tank unit. So the wiring of the pump is red and then dark blue and yellow, okay? So let's just check the front tank. So we need to test the red wire and the dark blue and yellow. So the wiring for the inline pump up here is good. Okay, the wiring color is correct. So now let's check this one over here. So this is the front tank. So for the front tank we have dark blue and yellow right here. How does this look, Matt? Dark blue and yellow, right? Dark blue and yellow. So dark blue wire and the yellow tracer, and then red. So this one. So these two wires are the wires for the fuel pump. And actually, as I'm looking at them closely, these two are the two big wires in this wiring harness. So which means our heavy gauge wires will be our fuel pump wires. Okay, so we're gonna test these two wires. And then we're gonna go to, let's see, Now this is a little confusing. I don't know if this is the pump or just the fuel level sensor. It's a little odd. Okay, let's go check the back ones. So back ones we have brown and white. I can see brown and white up there. And then yellow and light blue. I can see yellow and light blue. So it's these two over here. Brown and then yellow and light blue. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. So now I'm gonna grab my test light so we can test these wires. Now we have to make sure that there is power and ground going to these fuel pumps. So we're gonna start up here. So now we're gonna test this inline fuel pump first. So I'm gonna use these two piercing tools so we can connect to these two wires here. And then I'm gonna use this test light. I'm gonna connect my test light to these two piercing tools. All right, so I'm gonna be down here under the truck. Matt is gonna go in the truck and crank the engine for us. While the engine is cranking, if we have good power and good ground at these wires, the test light should light. So now I'm gonna lower the truck so we can get Matt in the truck so he can crank the engine for us. We have Matt in the truck, so Matt is going to turn the key on first. Can you go ahead and turn the key on? Yep. Is the key on? Yep. Okay, so key is on. Our test light doesn't light, so we most likely don't have power going into this pump. So go ahead and crank the engine. Okay. So the engine is cranking. We do not have power going to this pump. So let me make sure we are making good connection here. Crank it again. All right. Now, is this a wiring issue? Now, let's see if we can follow this wire. This wire over here, this wire goes up here. It goes around, comes here. So here's the electrical connector. I don't know where this wire goes. Okay. We need to follow this wire and see where it goes. Yeah, so that's it right there. Okay, so I'm gonna try to follow this wire here. I'm gonna follow it and see where it goes. It goes up here, it goes up under the hood. So I'm gonna try to follow it. Let's lower the truck so we can follow this wire. This wire loom. Because these wires are going to the inline fuel pump. I followed the wiring of this inline pump. These two wires go around the frame and they go back in the vehicle under the dash. So I believe these two wires go somewhere around the fuse box inside the vehicle. So I'm gonna use my power probe. I'm gonna energize this pump to see if it's gonna run. So I'm gonna send ground over here. Actually, let me check. So we have ground here. So let's check the ground wire first. If I send power on this side of the test light should light. Okay, we have good ground at the pump, so that's good. If we have good ground at the pump, if I send power down this pink wire with a black tracer, the pump should run if it's good. Oh, right there. Can you hear it? Do you hear the pump? Actually, I can hear fuel. I can hear gas coming out of the tank. Listen, I hope you can hear it. Can you feel fuel coming out of the tank? Yeah? So it looks like we have to get this pump to run If this pump runs, this truck is gonna start. Let's try this one more time. Yeah, can you hear fuel coming out of the tank? So we need to figure out what energizes this wire, or what energizes this pump. So what sends power down this wire, because there's ground at the pump, but we don't have power going to the pump. So we're missing power at this inline pump. And the pump is running, because when we send power to it, it runs. So let's lower the truck. Let's go back in the truck. I'm gonna have to look behind the fuse box under the dash so I can figure out where this wire goes. I don't know if it goes to a relay or a fuse. The wiring diagram is not really showing me exactly where this wire goes to, so we're gonna have to figure it out. So now let's lower the truck. If you guys can see this on the wiring diagram, so here's the pump, okay, our inline fuel pump. So we checked this leg of the circuit. So the black wire is good because there's ground going to the pump. Now we have to check this side of the circuit, okay? The issue could be this inertia switch preventing power from going to the pump, because if you see over here, if you look between this pump and this switch, there is technically nothing. There is this over here, but this does not apply to our vehicle. What does it say? In-tank fuel pump, single tank. So we don't have a single tank, we have dual tanks. So we have two tanks. So this over here doesn't apply to us. Okay, so we're gonna focus on this circuit here. Now, I don't know where this goes to. Fuel pump cutoff relay. So we have to figure out where this fuel pump cutoff relay is, because this is what sends power to the inertia switch. And then when the inertia switch closes, it sends power to this pump. So we have to check this leg of the circuit. So from this side of the pump all the way to the inertia switch, and then all the way to the fuel pump cutoff relay. So I'm gonna lower the truck. I will figure out where the fuel pump cutoff relay is, and then I will bring you guys back up. All right, guys, a couple of days later, now we're back on this old truck. I did talk to the Mutual Pro Demand guys. So Mutual Pro Demand is my service information. I didn't know where the inertia switch was located on this vehicle and where the fuel pump relay was. So I called them. They walked me through how to find it on the service info. They showed me where the inertia switch is and where the fuel pump relay is. The inertia switch is actually on the passenger side, just next to the transmission hump. So I saw that off camera. I checked the switch. The inertia switch looked good. And then I came here under the hood. I looked at where the fuel pump relay was. I got access to the fuel pump relay. It's actually bolted to the firewall next to the brake booster. I undid it and then I stopped. I said, okay, I gotta turn on the camera so I can bring everybody around. So what I was doing was, so remember last time the test we did was I sent power to the fuel pump wire, to the wire that supplies power to the fuel pump. When I sent power to it, we could hear the pump running. We kind of stopped around this area over here. Okay, so now I know where the inertia switch is, and I know where the fuel pump relay is. So now what I'm gonna do is we're gonna get access to the fuel pump relay. So if Matt can bring you guys over here. Now, the other thing that I did off camera, I also removed the engine air filter box. So I took the air filter box out. So here is our fuel pump relay. Okay, so the fuel pump relay is protected by this cover, and it goes over here next to the brake booster. So here's the relay. I'm going to disconnect it from this cover. So that's the connector, and then here comes the relay. So here's the fuel pump relay. Now I'm going to reconnect it. I'm gonna grab a test light. So we should have 2 powers on this relay, if I remember correctly. Let me grab a test light. I'm gonna go in the vehicle and turn the key on. All right, so the key is on in the vehicle. I just tried to bump the key. So I'm gonna connect my power probe to the battery. Okay, so power probe is connected to the battery. So now I'm gonna connect my test light to the power probe ground. So we're gonna connect this over here. So there's ground on this side of the test light. If I send power here, the test light is gonna light. So as you can see, test light lights, so our test light works. So now I'm gonna check all the wires at the fuel pump relay. We got power here, nothing here. I don't know if you heard that. Did you hear that, Matt? So every time I back probe this, that's odd. We have something that comes on. Yeah, I don't know. This yellow stuff looks like grease. Huh. Interesting. So if this is the fuel pump relay, if I jump this relay, our fuel pump should run. Okay, so let me look at this. So it looks like these tiny 2 pins over here will be our control side of the relay, and these 2 big pins over here will be the load side of the relay. So it looks like these 2 are the load side and these 2 are the control. So let's see. We got power here, we got nothing here. So if I send power to this pin, our fuel pump should run. So I'm gonna grab a jumper wire. Let me see if I can do it with this. Do you hear that? I don't know if you can hear. When I send power down to this wire, these wires look a little bit discolored because they are old. Listen. I hear the pump running. So now I wonder if we can jump the relay with a jumper wire and turn on the pump continuously and crank the engine to see if the engine is gonna start. Because if we keep sending power to the fuel pump wire at the relay to keep the pump running, and if we crank the engine should start. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna grab a jumper wire and then I'll be right back. All right, so here's what we're gonna use. We're gonna use this jumper wire. So I'm gonna connect to this pin over here, and then let me see. Do you hear the pump running? The pump is running. So now, since we have the pump running, I'm gonna crank the engine. If everything is good, this engine should start. So now I'm gonna go and, did it stop? Okay, we lost connection. All right. I hope the camera is picking that up, but the pump is definitely running. So I'm gonna crank the engine. The pump is running, but the truck is not starting. Okay, so what do you guys think is the issue? I'm gonna stop the pump. Can you show over here, Matt? So we are sending power down to the pump. The pump is running, but the truck doesn't start. So let me disconnect this. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna connect a pressure gauge to the fuel rail to see if we have enough fuel pressure at the rail. I'm gonna grab the pressure gauge just to double check, and then I'll bring you guys back up. Now we're gonna use our fuel pressure gauge to see if we have fuel pressure on the rail, because although I hear the pump running, but maybe the pump is not building enough fuel pressure. So I have these adapters here. So I'm gonna connect this. I remember we did it, but we didn't have fuel pressure.
Oh, yeah,
because we didn't have fuel in the tank. I have my fuel gauge attached to the fuel rail. So I hope you guys can see this. So now I'm gonna turn on the pump manually here with the relay. Check this out. So we have enough fuel pressure on the rail. Do you see the gauge, Matt? Okay, so we have 40 psi. So this truck should start. So right now, so I'm gonna leave this over here. Just look at the gauge, Matt. I'm gonna go in the truck and crank the engine. So we are holding fuel pressure, right? The gauge didn't move. The engine cranks. The engine sounds good. I don't think we have a compression issue. Now my question to you is, what do you think is the issue? What do you think is causing this? We have good fuel pressure, but when we crank the engine doesn't start. So at this point, it could be spark, but I think we checked spark last time, right? This had spark. So what do you think is the problem here? So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna check for injector pulse. Okay, I'm gonna disconnect one fuel injector. Okay, so here's the connector of the fuel injector. I'm gonna get my Noid light. I'm gonna connect my Noid light to the injector connector. Then we're gonna crank the engine to see if the Noid light is gonna turn on. Maybe we don't have injector pulse. Okay, all right, so here is my Noid light. I'm gonna test my Noid light. I'm gonna connect this over here. I'm gonna send power to this side of the Noid light. If the Noid light is good, it's gonna come on right there. Our Noid light comes on, so we know it's good. Now I'm gonna connect it to the injector electrical connector. Okay, so Matt, you're gonna point the camera at this little light over here. So I'm gonna go in the vehicle and crank the engine. If the computer is turning on the injector, this light should flicker. You're gonna see this Noid light flicker. So watch that light. I'm gonna go in the vehicle and crank the engine. Is it flickering?
No.
No? Okay, let's try this one more time. Let me crank it again. All right, so no injector pulse because the Noid light is not flickering. So now, what do we do? What's next? The Noid light is not flickering. Now what I wanna do is I wanna check for power at the injector. So I'm gonna use my test light. I'm gonna connect my test light to battery ground. Let me make sure the key is on in the vehicle. I'm gonna turn the key on. With the key on, we should have power going to the injector. So one of these wires should have power. Oh, look at this. Test light lights. This is odd. Test light lights on both pins. Actually, when I back probe this, I hear a buzzing noise coming from under the hood. Can you hear it, Matt? That's odd. Now, as I'm looking at these injector wires here, let me grab a back probing tool. So let's use this back probing tool. Now, the injectors have a couple wires on them. So we have 4 injectors on this side. One thing I'm noticing is all these injectors have a red wire. So this one has a red wire, this one has a red wire, this one has a red wire, this one also has a red wire. So all the common wires on these injectors should be our power supply wires. So I'm gonna back probe this red wire. My test light is connected to ground. I'm gonna touch the back probing tool, watch, test light lights. So we're gonna move it to this injector here. same thing. Okay, we hear a buzzing noise, but we have power going to the injectors. So here's what I know. We have power going to the injectors, but we don't have control because our Noid light did not come on. So now what I'm gonna do is, let me grab my scan tool. Let's look at the wiring diagram where we have our injectors. Okay, so on this diagram, we have, so here are our injectors. We have injectors on bank 1, and I believe this is bank 2. So we have a red wire. As you can see over here, all these injectors share a red wire, which is the power supply wire to the injectors. And then over here, all these wires are also tied together. So based on the wiring diagram, it looks like these injectors are fired as a group. Okay, so the engine computer controls all these wires, all these injectors at the same time. So now what I want to do is, since we don't have the control at the injectors, the issue could be an open wire between the injectors and the engine computer, okay? Or maybe a defective driver inside the engine computer. So now what I want to do is, I want to go to the engine computer and I want to back probe this wire. I can't highlight this wire because this schematic is old. So I'm going to back probe the control wire of these injectors, which is a 10 wire with a red tracer, and it is pin 59. Okay, so right here, pin 59. So let's get to the engine computer and back probe pin 59. I'm going to connect my test light to power. We're gonna back probe this wire over here, pin 59, and when we crank the engine, if the engine computer is turning on the injectors, the test light should flicker. Okay, so now let's go in the vehicle so we can get access to pin 59. Here is our engine computer, and this is the electrical connector of the engine computer. So I'm going to disconnect the engine computer by undoing this 10mm bolt, and then we're gonna find pin, I think it was pin 59. Yeah, I have my schematic over here on the scan tool. Pin 59 is the control wire of one group of injectors. So these pins should be numbered. So we have, what number is this? Let me see here. Yeah, so this is 60, this is 59. So here's pin 59. I hope you can see. I don't know, you guys probably won't be able to see the numbers because the numbers are so tiny. So this over here is pin 59. So I'm gonna back probe this pin over here. This is pin 59. I'm gonna reconnect the electrical connector. So I'm back probing pin 59. So Matt, you're gonna crank the engine for me when I tell you. Do you think you can crank the engine while you're also holding the camera or propping the camera? I'm actually connecting this side of the test light to our power probe, and then this side of the test light is gonna go to our control wire of the injector. Okay? So right now, actually, Matt, let me check one thing. So turn the key on. Is the key on? Yeah, the key is on. So I'm gonna connect my test light to ground. So the key is on. If the wiring is good, if I touch this back probing tool, my test light should light. So check this out. Test light lights. Now, why is the test light lighting? I'm gonna bring the scan tool here, the schematic. So basically, power is flowing through the red wire, through the injectors, and then through the control wire, through this wire all the way up to pin 59 at the engine computer. So this tells me that the wiring of the injector, from the injector all the way to the engine computer is good, okay? Because check this out, test light lights, because this power is going through the injector windings under the hood. So now we're gonna switch our test light to the power probe power. I'm gonna connect this. Now you're gonna crank the engine. I'm gonna send power here. Watch this. Let go. Okay. I'm gonna send power here again, crank it. All right, that's good. So there is no control coming from the engine computer. So the engine computer is not controlling the injectors. So it's not turning on the injectors. So at this point, the issue is either a bad computer or computer powers and grounds. Now, we're not just gonna condemn a computer, although it's starting to look like we have a computer issue. So now what I wanna do is, I wanna check my powers and grounds of the engine computer first. If we have good power and good ground at the engine computer, the issue is a bad computer. So let's start checking our powers and grounds first. So it looks like pin 60 is a ground. So this over here. So pin 60 is a ground. So it's actually next to this wire. So I'm going to use my piercing tool. Okay, so let's make sure we have ground on all the ground wires. And then if our grounds are good, then we're gonna check our power wires. Okay, now I'm gonna connect my test light to power. So I send power, nothing. That's odd. So we got no ground on pin, what pin is that? Pin 60. It's a black wire with a light green. And then where's the other ground? The other ground is pin 49. Huh. Okay, it looks like all these black wires are our ground wires. Okay, let's pierce this one now. So we have one ground wire that's missing ground. So that's good to know. Now I'm gonna connect my test light to it. So one side of the test light is connected to the power probe, and then the other side of the test light is connected to the ground wire. I'm gonna flip this. As you can see, we don't have a ground over here. Huh. This might be our problem, guys. So now let's check the other wire over here. Let's check this. So we have two ground wires that are missing ground. Let's check this. Oh, check this out. So this one has ground on it. So when I send power on this side of the test light with our power probe, watch this, test light lights. So we have one ground wire that has ground, so which is pin 40. So these two are missing ground. And then we have another one over here. Let's check this one. So we have two ground wires that are missing ground. And then we have a fourth ground wire over here. Let me check this one. And these are constant grounds, so no ground. So we have three computer wires. We have three ground wires that are missing ground. So the first one is pin 60 is a ground, but it's missing. Pin 49 is a ground, it's missing. And then pin 40. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do. I would like to send the ground down to these wires. Before we check our power wires, since we know we're missing ground on all these wires, I'm gonna use these test leads. I'm gonna send ground down these wires. We're gonna get ground from our power probe. Okay, so this clamp on the power probe has ground. So Oh, did you hear that, Matt? So I sent ground to this. Something came on. I think we found our problem, buddy. Let me grab another alligator clamp and another test lead. So it looks like our computer is missing ground because I heard something click under the hood. So we are on the right path. Let me check that and see what happens. So I got this test lead over here that we're gonna connect to this. So now what I'm doing is I am sending ground to all my computer grounds, okay? Because we know all these wires don't have ground. So now I'm gonna connect this over here. Perfect. So I heard something come on. So now I hope you guys can see this. Matt, I hope you can show this. I mean, this looks a little confusing. I hope it's not. So this is me getting a ground from our power probe, and the power probe is connected to the battery. So all these test leads are going to these piercing tools. So we're sending ground down these black wires that don't have ground. Okay, can you see this okay? All right, so now I'm gonna crank the engine. I heard something click. Check that out. It's running, baby. Let's go under the hood. Okay, so I'm gonna start it. Wow, that's loud. What do you think, Matt? You think it's fixed? Show the engine. Pretty loud. Okay, let's turn it off. We don't have the air filter box on, so I don't want to run it. I don't want to run it for too long. Let me start it one more time. I'm gonna rev it a little bit. All right. Sounds good. It's idling well. So. All right, so it's getting late over here. The good thing is we figured out what's wrong. We know what the issue is. Now, we don't need to check our computer power wires. So the engine computer is missing 2 grounds. So let me see, the ground over here. So the first one is pin 60, this one over here. Okay, this ground is missing. Now, since this is an old truck, those grounds might be rusted out. I don't know where those grounds are. They might be on the frame. Maybe they're rusted out. So I'm gonna end this over here. I don't have to show you the process of fixing the ground wires. I'm gonna have to locate the ground wires. And then if those grounds are rusted out, I might have to run new ground wires. And then this is gonna be done. So we know the engine computer is missing ground. We gotta fix that and we should be good to go. So yeah, I mean, we followed the data. We looked for injector pulse. Actually, not having the injector pulse is what led us to the engine computer. And we figured out that the computer was not controlling the injectors. We checked our grounds. There was our problem. We were missing ground. So we're good to go. So I'm gonna leave this right over here. I hope you liked the video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give it a thumb down. But if you do, you gotta tell me why so we can make better videos in the future. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you can get notified every time we upload a new video. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, leave them in the comment box. Thanks for watching. See you next time.